There are lots of studies that prove that older adults benefit from having friends, living in communities, having people around them. And while that is a wonderful concept, nobody talks about just how difficult it is to make friends, especially after you're 50 years old. Think about it. How did you make friends when you were younger? Often, our friends were people that were in school with us, that we worked with, maybe that participated in civic events, people at church, but it's sad to say, the older we get, the more likely it is that those friends disappear. My second grade best friend died this past year. And one of the things that I want to do is to create the Diane Lantern in support of people like her who I feel left this world with an unfulfilled potential. Hi, I'm Dr. B. I'm a creativity researcher. I started teaching college at the age of 49. I earned my PhD at 61, and I published my first book when I was 65. This channel is dedicated to creative women over 50 who are seeking more. How does an older person make friends? I think that the best way to make friends is to be friendly. And it does take some effort. I met a wonderful friend, Nan, on these very trails where I am walking. She was somebody I frequently passed, and we started just the usual, hello, how are you? Good to see you again. The beautiful thing about hiking trails is that people almost always say hi. It's so different than walking down the streets in a town or in a city where it's almost taboo to speak to another person. And if you do, you might be considered strange. But you can begin by being friendly. One day I remember I complimented Nan on a turquoise brooch that she was wearing. She stopped and touched it and told me a beautiful story about buying this brooch at a tiny store in Taos, New Mexico, where she lived for a couple years. And then that was it. I continued. She continued the opposite way. But eventually, I got up the nerve to tell her about an event that I was going to be hosting. This was a Zoom workshop. And in order to share the details, I gave her my email address and said, send me an email and I will send you all of the information so that you can log on and you can watch this workshop. And one thing led to another. 3 years ago, I knew it was her birthday coming up, And her husband at the time was in a memory care facility. I decided I'm going to leave her a lovely cupcake, some flowers, and a card, which I did. She was so grateful for that gesture. And our friendship has grown and developed since then. If you begin by being friendly, the action is very often returned back to you tenfold. Now, how do you meet people to be friendly with? Well, nobody really talks about this, but sometimes it does take a matter of getting outside of your usual environment. Join a group that has like-minded people. Go to your senior center if you can. Attend the events that they have and make the effort to be friendly, to put out your hand and say, "Hi, how are you? My name's Bernadette. What's your name?" You might be surprised. Once you make an acquaintance, make the effort to set up a date. Could be a walk around a lake, by a river, through the woods. It could be going to a coffee shop, sitting down and sharing your ideas. Talk a little bit about your history, where you come from, where you are, and where you hope to go. And that is going to give you a lot of conversation. You can also arrange to go to some sort of a meeting or event or a concert. Keep in mind that things like that, a talk, a lecture, a program, you might be sitting next to the person, but you're not going to have the opportunity to really engage in conversation. However, if you happen to drive together, that gives you a chance to talk. Going to, waiting for the program to begin, and coming back home. Once you have gone on your activity, be sure to connect again after. I think a thank you is a beautiful thing. And might I suggest, a handwritten note means so much more than just an email or a text. I think a final step in developing a friendship is doing it again. Finding more things to do together. I met my friend Kim while we were both attending a 6-week class on children's book writing and illustration. Kim sat next to me, and during a break, we were talking like you do, very surface level. I happened to ask her where she lived, and she told me, and surprise, surprise, it was my hometown. I found out she lived less than a quarter of a mile from me. We exchanged telephone numbers, and before the next class, I called to ask if she would like to drive to the class together. She said, "That's a great idea." Over the next 5 weeks, we had lots of time to talk. But then the class ended, and the friendship might have dissolved. But I got up the nerve to pick up the phone. I think this is one of those cases where I can successfully say, and the rest is history. It gets harder the older that you are. The more years behind you, the fewer years ahead of you. I will leave you with one final suggestion in making friends. One excellent idea is to contact old friends, people that you might have gone to high school with, friends that you made through your own children, or maybe work acquaintances, people that you met in a class or a workshop. Contact them again. It takes time and it takes effort, and nobody's really talking about that. The benefits are enormous. The more community that you have surrounding you, the happier you will be, I guarantee. So if you found this video helpful, if there was one little tidbit that made sense to you, if I gave you one tip that you might think about applying, please give it a thumbs up. Share it with friends. This video is sponsored by me, Dr. B, and doyourart.org. I am the founder of the Sisterhood of Questing Queens. I am on a quest to develop a huge network of questing queens. We are on a quest to develop our own creativity, to find meaning in life. If you got this far in the video, type Questing Queen in the comments, and I will send you a very special gift. A biento.